Now, each time on this Sunday, as you know, we take a look at the big stories, the big issues in crime this week, and as always, to guide you through it all is Jackie Haynes, who served with the Metropolitan Police for 30 years. I think it's a bit cruel, Jackie, that we highlight your 3 decades in the force. We're starting this week, though, aren't we, with the issue of protecting children from abuse online and in person, because you know that recent high-profile court cases have put child abuse in the headlines. I mean, really, Jackie, as never before, we do see it in the headlines an awful lot at the moment.
We do, and what's happened this week, which I think is a huge step forward in a positive way, is the Association of Chief Police Officers have set up a central working group called Operation Hydrant, which is going to monitor and provide a strategic overview across the whole country of what investigations are doing. It's not going to actually investigate anything, but it's going to monitor what's happening in each one of those investigations, pull together the learning practice and feed it back into training and advice to forces, so that all those investigations, we're not losing the expertise that's being gained, because this is a very new area for UK policing, and it's a lot for them to take on board.
Does that give it some sort of element of historic accuracy as well, looking back on what has happened in the past?
Yes, very much so. We haven't looked back into the past in any sort of crime area before in quite so much detail. And what this will do is to make sure that, particularly with high-profile people, perhaps offending in different parts of the country, that somebody will be taking a strategic look and watching out for those repetitions of behaviour by these people, and to make sure that nothing gets missed. And in fact, I had a really good conversation with the ex-head of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Service, Jim Gamble, to talk about the challenges faced by the police and also the public as well. And this is my report.
Breaking news, more than 600 suspected paedophiles have been arrested as part of a 6-month police operation.
Well, child protection, you know, to use a cliche, is everybody's responsibility. It's everybody's business.
These arrests have safeguarded at least 400 children across the United Kingdom.
It's complex, and the thing that makes it a little more difficult is it's highly emotive. Child protection has become ever more complex because of the advent of new public spaces that we call the internet. Whenever I was growing up, you know, my favourite magazine was the Kay's Women's Underwear catalogue. You know, young people will want to experiment with their own sexuality. They'll want to go in different directions. Now, however, that experimenting, that sense of intrigue about your sexuality can be exploited by others on the internet. So it has accelerated the nature of the problem. It hasn't created paedophiles or people who abuse against children, but it's opened a window and expanded the opportunity for people with a deviant sexual interest in kids to engage them.
When I first joined the police in the 70s, the word paedophile was one that we didn't really even understand, and I doubt if the public even wanted to understand. How have we moved on, and is it a good thing that we know so much more about it?
I think it is a good thing, but at times, you know, I'm guilty myself of talking about paedophiles, those who will abuse against children, in terms that can almost be scaremongering. You can't help it because we live in the age of the soundbite. And it's important that people understand there's not a paedophile in every street corner. There's not a sex offender living, you know, in every street, in every town, in every city in the UK. And there's not a paedophile online just waiting for your child to go there. It's about getting the balance right.
I suppose many members of the public will have grown up without the internet and are having to teach their children things that perhaps they're not understanding themselves very well.
Parents tend to undermine themselves. They have a lifetime's worth of experience. They understand friendship. They understand, you know, stranger danger. They understand the importance of knowing where where their child is going to be and who they're going to be with. Let me give you an example. If you're a parent and you want to understand the risk that your child faces, have a conversation with them about their Facebook page, but make it sensible. Ask them how many friends they have that have no mutual friends with anyone else in their friendship circle. That is very, very unusual. If you take a child with 200 or 300 friends, they will all have 10 or 20 or more mutual friends. Where you get the person that's infiltrated that friendship group as a single entity, or someone with only one other mutual friend, they're worth looking at. That's not about being Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg. That's about understanding the friendship circles that kids have. They don't work in isolation.
What about using technology and apps and things like that to try and raise awareness and to prevent crime like this?
The use of technology is key. We talk about technology as if it's a negative, and I'm really glad that you raised that point. I mean, I speak in a lot of places, and you go to events and you talk to social workers, people involved in policing, child protection, and you ask, when was the last time you were on the missing persons website? And not a single hand goes up. Using technology, for example, that would allow you, and when you're walking through the streets of Hackney, for example, to know that this child went missing there 3 weeks ago by popping their picture onto your phone, because the phone recognises the geography you're in. That would be helpful.
Shocking new details about Jimmy Savile, the man who was today described as having an unwholesome sexual interest in the dead.
Breaking news this afternoon, Rolf Harris has been found guilty of all 12 counts of indecent assault.
How difficult is it for an investigator when somebody walks in off the street and says, I was abused 30 years ago and I want to tell you about it?
With these cases, because they happened so long ago, you're dealing with an individual where the hurt, the mental scars will still be there as if they were yesterday, but you won't have the toolbox to set up a scene to capture forensic evidence which will be long gone. So it is difficult. I think the real success that I've seen through Operation U-Tree and the Metropolitan Police's approach to dealing with what people class as historic allegations is the fact that they are believing the people that come forward as victims. They're listening to them, they're believing them, and that's encouraging others. I think when you're talking about a sexually motivated crime, and a crime that's sexually motivated against the very young and the very vulnerable, that type of predator never stops. They learn, they get better, they hide who they are and what they do in plain sight. We saw that with Savile, we've seen it with Rolf Harris and Max Clifford. And what they do is they're people who are in positions of trust. And they're trusted because the public tend to be seduced by celebrity, by wealth, by influence and position. So we don't want to believe these people would do it.
Do you think then that there are celebrities abusing their positions even now and attacking and seducing children?
I think there are family members today who are abusing their children. I think there are people who are linked to families who are using that link and that position of trust to abuse children. And of course, if you just look at the statistics, of course there will be people, some of them. And the danger is, some of them won't believe they're abusers. And there's a danger in that. And it's not just about the high-profile celebrity case. It's about what we call child sexual exploitation on the street. It's the young girls and boys hanging out at the shopping mall who, by virtue of their geographic proximity to some men who have money, who have cars, who bring them to parties, who impress them either through friendship or gifts or by intoxicating them. There is little or no difference.
Not one, but two special inquiries called into claims of widespread child abuse.
We will do everything we can to allow the full investigation of child abuse and the prosecution of its perpetrators, and we will do nothing to jeopardise those aims.
So what's happening now? What is the fallout from all this that can be used in a positive way for child protection moving forward?
I think moving forward, a lot of people have paused to think, and that's really important. I believe there is a push within government. There's a recognition, not least because of the 114 documents going missing and the speculation about conspiracy. Whether that's true or not, that has caused government to pause and reflect. You need a focused investigation there to discover whether or not those documents were lost or destroyed, and if so, whether there was any criminal intent.
And finally, Jim, if somebody watching this, maybe in their 50s, 60s, had an appalling incident in their past, they were abused and it's affected them all their lives and found it difficult to deal with, what would you say to them?
Well, it's difficult to know what to say to someone who has suffered for that long. What I would say is, look at the difference that's been made by people coming forward. If you can find the strength to come forward and tell your story, I think you should. Number one, I believe it may help you. And number two, if the person who abused you is still alive, then I believe that person will still most likely be abusing others today. And playing a part in stopping that is a legacy that might go somewhere to helping heal those wounds.
Jackie, Jim Gamble makes some really important points there, and if we cover some of those, And first and foremost, for the parents watching right now, because a lot of this is going to concern parents with their kids on the internet. And as you said to Jim, they don't always feel au fait with the technology. He made some very interesting points about understanding the circle of online friends, didn't he?
And I think what actually gets parents is they feel they don't have access to the knowledge about technology and get overwhelmed by the words and all these sites that their children are going onto that they perhaps haven't even heard of before. But I think it's all about talking to your children, sitting down with them, having a look at these sites, having a look at the friends that they're making, because their instincts as adults that they've learnt over the years about what's appropriate and what isn't is so important. So it's more about communicating with your children than understanding the technology. And if there's anything that you feel is not appropriate, or your child has a friend online that you're not happy with, and you feel that unwarranted advances are being made to them, just go onto the CEOP's website. They have a very easy way of reporting online abuse or inappropriate behaviour towards a child, and the police will give you a lot of advice and guidance through that process. And they also have a really good information website called Think You Know, which gives advice to parents, to children and to people in the education system. And it's very simply put and very straightforward and can really help.
So don't be afraid to get involved.
No, exactly. It's about talking to your children and, and using it as a way of building your relationship with them.
And about talking to people, we know in the past there has been this sort of fear from children, from a lot of women as well, saying, I don't want to go to the police, they don't understand, they don't believe me. There does seem to be a sea change there.
There has, and I think it's public driven. I think this tipping point we reached with Jimmy Savile and the number of people coming forward have really forced the police to get on the front foot and say, OK, we're embracing this now. It was almost like they were fighting against it before, in as much as they were questioning every detail. Now they realised what has been going on and the bigger picture, and there's absolutely no reason why every person who comes forward shouldn't be dealt with compassion and sympathy and support. And if they aren't, then complaints need to be made. But I think you'll find that an awful lot of lessons have been learnt about how to deal with victims in these sorts of cases, and moving forward that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Jackie, thank you. More with Jackie actually in just a moment.